Philippines. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Tonight on the program, authorities begin the grim task of counting the deaths in the aftermath of Typhoon Odette as survivors in devastated Dinagat Island send out letters to families. A Filipino who recently returned home from Qatar is now the country's third case of the highly transmissible Omicron coronavirus variant. And the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man swings into box office records. The latest franchise film makes the third biggest global debut and becomes the highest grossing movie of the year.
Ability to hypnotize females.
The number of casualties from the strongest typhoon to hit the country this year is expected to rise as the extent of damage in the Visayas and Mindanao continues to unfold. National disaster response officials said at least 58 people were reported to have died because of Typhoon Odette. Only 9, however, are confirmed. The remaining 49 are still up for validation. The number is lower than the tally of the Philippine National Police. PNP said 208 people died because of the typhoon, while it logged 239 injuries and 52 missing persons. The NDRRMC says it is not disregarding these reports, but it considers them as projections. Civil Defense Assistant Secretary Casiano Monilla also pointed out that unlike the PNP, the NDRRMC does not have units deployed in all areas, including cities and municipalities. In Negros Oriental, local officials fear the casualty count could still climb as there are still a number of people missing. Just this morning, Coast Guard officials recovered 4 more bodies in Bae City, about 46 kilometers north of the provincial capital, Dumaguete City. They said the bodies were found in mangrove areas. In Bohol, Governor Arthur Yap said there are now 94 people who died in the province, adding that this figure is only a partial report. And in Cebu, at least 76 are reported dead in the entire island, while one town remains isolated 4 days after being ravaged by Typhoon Odette. Nearly 88,000 people across southern Leyte suffered from the typhoon. That's according to regional disaster management officials. Local authorities and people there are appealing for more assistance. Wilmark Amazona joins us on the line for more details. Wilmark, go ahead.
Pia, people in Leyte are beginning to pick the pieces. In Cahagnaan village in Matalom, more than 200 people lost their houses to destructive winds. The town was in the path of Typhoon Odette. More than 40 people are still staying in evacuation centers. Some also lost their source of livelihood. Officials are appealing for supply of potable water. People in Matalom and the neighboring towns of Bato and Hilongos have received relief packs. Local officials have also sent help to southern Leyte and some towns in Leyte. In particular, non-food items like hygiene kits, equipment, and personnel were sent to Maasin City. There are reports of 21 deaths and 11 missing people in southern Leyte, but these are still subject to verification. Local officials and the military are calling for donations and volunteers to help in the recovery and rehabilitation work in southern Leyte. Back to you, Pia.
Wilmark Amazona there reporting. Power and communication lines remain cut in some typhoon-hit areas, so survivors in Dinagat Islands are writing letters instead to let their families know they're safe. These are just some of the letters posted by Governor Kaka Bagao. Bagao says many people are asking for updates and information about the relatives, so she asked locals to write letters. Most of the letters read that their homes have been damaged, but that they're happy to be alive. One even wrote her sister saying, quote, "Our houses are roofless, but we are not hopeless." To help motorists reeling from the typhoon's impact, some fuel firms spare several Visayas and Mindanao areas from the price hike set to take effect tomorrow. Phoenix Petroleum says it will not increase pump prices in typhoon-hit provinces. There will be no changes as well in the fuel prices of Caltex in Odette-hit areas, including Cebu, Bohol, Surigao, Palawan, and Coronadal. Meanwhile, Sea Oil will not impose price adjustments in areas under a state of calamity. Sea Oil will also offer discounts in its 97 stations in the Visayas and Mindanao. 4 peso per liter discount for gasoline and 2 pesos per liter for diesel. This will be available beginning today until December 31st. Meanwhile, Pag-asa is keeping an eye on a low-pressure area right on the heels of Odette. Forecasters last spotted the weather disturbance east of Mindanao. They say it has a slim chance of developing into a typhoon, but it may bring rains in the southern part of the country on Christmas Day. Meantime, back here in Metro Manila, 4 policemen in Taguig City and their cohort face charges for a robbery that took place in Pasig City on Saturday. All are under the custody of the Pasig City Police, who are still searching for 2 other suspects. Authorities say a Japanese national and his Filipino partner were held at gunpoint in their home in Barangay Capitolio, where the suspect stole 30 million pesos in cash and a mobile phone. A shootout took place after they fled, leading to the death of one suspect, while another was injured. Coming up on Newsnight, officials want vaccine rollouts ramped up as the country detects its 3rd Omicron case. More when we return.
RPN Radio Philippines Network DXTD Dipolo Radio Ronda.
Ringo Honasan po. Sa pagbangon ng mga Pilipino, saludo ako sa mga taong patuloy na humaharap sa hamon ng pagbabago.
Bilang isang ina, handa akong gawin ang lahat para sa kaligtasan ng aking mga anak.
Pandemya man, tuloy pa rin ang serbisyo para malinis ang kapaligiran. Serbisyong publiko para sa kaligtasan ng lahat.
Sa panahon ng krisis, ikaw, ako, magtulungan tayo. Ringo Honasan po. Saludo ako sa Pilipino.
Merry Christmas ang bati, lahat tayo ay magdiwang.
Ang Pasko mo'y panahon sa pagmaya ug paghatag og kalipay sa atong mga mahal sa kinabuhi ug sa atong isig katao. Kini ang inyong alagad sa dakbayan sa dabitan si Bimbim Amoy ng Hinao. Nga unta luyo ning atong kahimtang karon. Nga unta anaa kita sa luwas sa atong panglawas aron sa mabulokong pagsaulog sa pagkatao ning atong manunubos nga si Jesus. Maayong Pasko ug masanagong bagong tuig kaninyong tanan. Daghang salamat.
Oras ay nag-aawitan. Merry Christmas, o kasayang tunay.
Quincentenary Faith Rewind.
The image of Santo Niño was among the gifts presented to Queen Juana, wife of Raha Humalbon before her baptism. The cross and the image of the Blessed Mother were the other gifts given to her according to Antonio Pigafetta.
KBP marks 500 years of Christianity and visitation. DXTD Dipolo Radio Ronda.
Standard Juicy.
Pagpapamalas ng malasakit, tapang at kabayanihan sa pagharap sa anumang pagsubok ng buhay. Yan ang mga taong kikilalanin natin sa ika-4 na taon ng Ginebra Ako Awards. Kabutihan ng puso at pagmamahal sa namayapang anak ang inspirasyon ng mag-asawang doktor na si George at Glenda sa pagpapatuloy sa kanilang advokasya. Tunay na ganado at may bagong tapang na lumalaban ang mag-asawang ito sa pagtulong sa kapwa.
Mang Nardo was the Mangtataho in our village. One weekend, Benjamin had noticed when he had gone out to see Mang Nardo, he saw that he had wounds on his shin. And Mang Nardo said because he didn't have any bike pedals anymore. Until he had bought the pedals already, because he gave it to Mang Nardo.
Nung nalaman ko po na isa ako sa nakuha nila, sobrang puntuan namin mag-asawa. Dati namamasaya ko, yung 60 pesos na idadagdag na sa pambili namin ng gastusin sa bahay. Kaya sobrang nakaaluan po kami.
Uwian po ako mula Taytay hanggang Muntinlupa. Kailangan ko magtrabaho kasi po kung hindi ako magtrabaho at yung dahilan lang ng bisikleta po yung nasiraan, malaking kabawasan po. Mabutit na isali po ako ng aking anak dito sa programang ito. Kumisa lang papaiyak ako dahil sa yung bisikleta ko talaga na bulok-bulok na, napalitan po ng bago.
Everybody who met Ben from the time that he was a young boy, they always said he was an old soul in a young boy's body. He was very kind.
When he passed away, that's when we realized that he had helped so many people, and that was one of the things that drove us to continue being kind to people.
At first it was the Benjamin Canlas Foundation, but there was something that just told me it had to say courage to be kind. We came together and we wanted to do something that we can continue, that would be of significance during the time of the pandemic.
Actually, ang sabi namin, let's be kind to people who are not seen.
Our message was, we see you, we appreciate you, somebody cares. It was Ben's passing that brought us to this mission. Kindness is possible. Kindness is the way forward for everyone.
Thank you for the Ginebra Ako Award. It means so much to us that we're recognized in our efforts, and hopefully by the recognition, it inspires others to be kind.
Paghanga para sa inyo, Dr. George and Glenda Canlas, sa patuloy na pagiging ganado at pagpapamalas ng bagong tapang, sa pagtupad ng atikain na nasila ng inyong napakabuting anak. Congratulations po! Kahanga-hanga ang inyong ginagawa para sa ating mga kababayan. Mabuhay kayo, Dr. George at Dr. Glenda. Hangad namin na marami pang Pilipinong nangangailangan ang inyong matutulungan, hatid ng inyong bagong tapang. Ako po si Pauline Verzosa at ito ang ika-4 na taon ng Ginebra Ako Awards. Tumitindi ang bagong tapang ng One Ginebra Nation.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Again, our top story, the number of casualties from Typhoon Odette expected to rise in the coming days as the extent of damage in Visayas and Mindanao continues to emerge. Now, what was supposed to be a blissful vacation in Siargao Island turned into a distressing journey for a group of friends when Odette unleashed its wrath. That story and more from Chrissy Matulak.
Michelle Maliksi and her friends went to Siargao Island on December 12th for that much-needed break from Manila. It was the perfect rest and recreation away from home for the first few days, but it would be a harrowing ordeal in the next. On the night of December the 16th, the go-to surfing destination was suddenly turned into a wasteland as it bore the full force of Typhoon Odette. Michelle shares how the place they stayed in gave way to destructive winds.
Ang hirap kasi sa Siargao, wala kaming matanungan, parang laging puro haka-haka lang or wala yung mga LGUs, parang we were left to fend for ourselves. Walang yung mga business owners, yung mga tourists, kami lang yung nag-uusap doon, wala kaming alam, wala kaming paubos na ba yung ganyan, tapos walang signal at all, pahirapan ng signal, tapos supply ng water, wala.
Siargao Airport was closed as the terminal was in ruins. So the group took a 3-hour boat ride to Cantilan in Surigao del Sur province. And from there, they took another 4-hour land trip to Butuan City in Agusan del Norte for an evening flight back to Manila. Michelle and her friends were traumatized through the agonizing trip. But she says many of their friends were left behind in Siargao waiting for assistance. Typhoon Odette left a trail of destruction as it cut across the central and southern regions. Dozens are dead and almost nearly 200 are injured. Hundreds of thousands are staying in evacuation centers, and a number of cities and municipalities are still off-grid, both on power and communication. The Social Welfare Department says more than 14 million pesos worth of initial assistance have been given to the victims. The government says it is on top of the situation.
Hindi pa naman tayo nag-open for foreign help because the government can by its own sustain the response effort and even the rehabilitation effort of these areas na affected ng COVID. But the UN Office for the Coordination on Humanitarian Assistance sent a letter already offering their technical expertise and other help.
The Philippine Red Cross is also extending help.
Bibigyan na sila ng tinatawag nilang hot meals. Alright? At pagkatapos meron tayo dun sa mga ports sa Matlog, yung mga naiwan doon, mga 5,000 people, pinakain rin yan ng Red Cross at saka ito mga kasama natin.
The NDRMC says it welcomes donations, but they remind the public to send these through legitimate agencies. Or people may send donations to the DSWD and Office of the Civil Defense. Chrissy Matulak, CNN Philippines.
A number of health officials in the Visayas and Mindanao were damaged in the health facilities in the aftermath of Typhoon Odette. According to the Department of Health, these facilities include the Center for Health Development in Central Visayas, as well as 2 hospitals and 3 barangay health stations in the Caraga region in Mindanao. The office of the DOH in Surigao del Norte was also damaged. Meanwhile, health officials calling on local governments to appoint safety officers in evacuation centers to make sure minimum public health protocols are observed.
Please provide separate areas for the vulnerable population, katulad po ng ating mga nakakatanda at saka yung po may mga comorbidities, and for those who have other illnesses as well. The DOH also warns of waterborne and foodborne illnesses, influenza-like illnesses, leptospirosis and dengue, or the wild diseases. We can avoid this by promoting access to water, sanitation and hygiene facilities.
Officials also want local governments to intensify vaccinations and boost COVID-19 response after the country reported its 3rd important case of the Omicron variant. Tristan Nodalo has more.
A returning Filipino from Qatar is the country's 3rd detected Omicron COVID-19 variant case. The health department says that he is unvaccinated but has no symptoms of the disease during quarantine. The person arrived via Qatar Airways on November 28. The passenger was tested for COVID-19 on December 4th. The case has 3 close contacts who are also in isolation.
Isang article pa even went on to say there is this specific symptom, colds, body malaise, low back pain, at saka loose bowel movement. But again, mga initial evidences po ito. Kailangan din hindi tayo complacent.
Vaccine Czar Carlito Galvez says the public should be on alert against the new variant. He adds public cooperation is needed so that the healthcare system will not be overwhelmed again.
Mukhang ina-underestimate natin ang Omicron. There is a possibility na talagang tataas din yung deaths at saka yung hospitalization at saka yung severe cases, considering that ma-overwhelm ang mga health services natin. Dapat mag-prepare tayo yung response natin in scale, meaning i-double up natin. Tingnan natin yung ating mga quarantine facilities. Tingnan natin yung ating mga hospital. Tingnan natin din yung mga tinatawag natin yung paano natin gagawin yung ating mga healthcare workers.
While the government is on alert against the possible spread of the new variant, Galvez says it's status quo on the alert level and restrictions. Officials add vaccination activity should further step up. From 7 million target vaccinees for the 2nd round of Bayanihan Bakunahan, the government has so far inoculated 2.5 million. Assessment is still ongoing on the impact of Typhoon Odette on the vaccine supplies in the Visayas and Mindanao. So far, 600 doses of Pfizer vaccines have been reportedly compromised from the typhoon. The government is also eyeing vaccination in evacuation centers. Tristan Nodalo, CNN Philippines.
Over 600 local governments in Mimaropa and Caraga regions, as well as in Western, Eastern, and Central Visayas, canceled vaccine rollouts because of the typhoon. Still on Newsnight, the latest Spider-Man movie smashes the record for the 3rd biggest opening in box office history. We'll have more of that when we return. Stay tuned.
RPN Radio Philippines Network DXTV Dipolo Radio Ronda Quincentenary Faith Rewind.
Ferdinand Magellan died in the hands of Dato Lapu-Lapu in the Battle of Mactan. Spanish navigator Juan Sebastian Elcano took command of the voyage, which finally reached the Spice Islands. To date, the expedition is also known as Magellan-Elcano Expedition.
KBP marks 500 years of Christianity and this station.
Honorable Angel Halusos Carion, Batanon, Buutan ug Malagaron, City Councilor of the Pitan City, Chairman, Committee on Tourism, Committee on Labor, Committee on Child Welfare and Development. Honorable Angel Halusos Carion, Batanon, Buutan ug Malagaron, City Councilor of the Pitan City.
Paturagas! Paturagas! Watod kaninyo sa mga labas ng mga balita. Paturagas! Paturagas! Mga balitang gikan sa lokal, regional ug nasyonal nga mga tinubdan. Paturagas! Biskot sa bisan unsang hinisgutanan nga may kalabigitan sa katawhan. Paturagas! Inyong mabati din hilamang sa RPN Dex Kiri Dipulo 1053 sa dial sa inyong mga radyo. Ang tulmanong paturagas
inyong mabati matag alas 8 ngadto na sa alas 9 sa buntag,
Lunes hangtod Biyernes.
Kalandraka tulumanon nga kulbahinam sa mga suking tigpaminaw, mga tigmo nga nagtangag sa pinyong makalingaw. Kalandrakas musabwag-usab sa mga impormasyon nga may kalamdigitan sa kalambuan o kayuhan sa katawhan. Kalandrakas mualagad kaninyo. Kalandrakas
DXTV Dipolo Radio Ronda.
Tayo ay buhay pa. Salamat sa Primera Light ang iyong tikman. Primera klase ang Primera Light inuman.
Salamat, Spree!
Enjoy the #1 pinakamasarap na Pure Foods Tender Juicy ngayong Pasko. Kasama ang sarap ng pamilya.
Sa pagbangon ng mga Pilipino, saludo ako sa mga taong patuloy na humaharap sa hamon ng pagbabago.
Bilang isang ina, handa akong gawin ang lahat para sa kaligtasan ng aking mga anak.
Banding naman, tuloy pa rin ang serbisyo para malinis ang kapaligiran. Serbisyong publiko para sa kaligtasan ng lahat.
Sa panahon ng krisis, ikaw, ako, magtulungan tayo. Saludo ako sa Pilipino.
The future looks bright in the north. Come December 2022, the Metro Rail Transit Line 7 is aimed to be completed by SMC Infrastructure.
Also known as MRT Line 7 or MRT7, this line will be 22.8 kilometers long with 14 stations that can accommodate up to 650,000 passengers daily from Quezon City to San Jose del Monte, Bulacan, and vice versa. It is expected to reduce travel time down to approximately 35 minutes one way. With a total of 36 train sets or 108 train cars being procured from South Korea Hyundai Rodam, this rail will connect MRT3 and LRT1. Housing the trains is not a concern, as SMC's depot can hold up to 150 trains for future capacity expansion. As for the performance, factory acceptance testing for the initial 6 train sets, or 18 cars, was also conducted in South Korea. Once completed, MRT7 is seen to offer a faster and safer means of transportation and spur economic growth in the northern part of Metro Manila and the province of Bulacan.
Ang Department of Energy po ang parang tatay natin sa enerhiya. Siya po ang in charge sa pagpaplano patungkol sa energy ng buong bansa.
When we talk about energy efficiency and conservation or EEC, it's really a way of life. It's something that each and every Filipino should be practicing. But of course, practice requires guidance, and this is where the EEC Act or RA 11285 comes in. It provides for the set of incentives, whether it's fiscal or non-fiscal, as well as mandatory requirements for all energy end users to achieve our goal of having more energy efficient Philippines.
Welcome back. All the biggest news stories of the year, from politics to pageants to sports. That's what we're bringing you for Rewind 2021, the CNN Philippines year-end special with Menchu Makapagal and our correspondents. Tune in on Wednesday, December 22nd at 8 p.m. only here on CNN Philippines. kicking off the latest headlines from the world of entertainment, a super heroic opening weekend at the box office. CNN's Douglas Hyde has that story and more on the Hollywood Minute.
You know, all this is kind of your mess.
Spider-Man No Way Home is smashing box office records. It earned $253 million its opening weekend. That's the third highest debut ever and the best ever debut for the Spider-Man franchise. After only one weekend, it's already the highest grossing film of 2021. Adele's 30 is #1 on the Billboard 200 albums chart for the fourth consecutive week. Taylor Swift was the last female artist to have an album top the chart that long, all the way back in August of 2020.
Mama.
Are you ready to be part of a holiday mutant toy parade? Yes, that's a thing. They're being held in selected cities across the U.S. Tuesday and feature dolls that have been altered to make noise and music. Everyone is invited to participate, and the toys will be free to take home. You can find more info at makemusicday.org. In Hollywood, I'm Douglas Hyde.
5 more days before Christmas, and that is it for now. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Loren Legarda po. 18 years akong senador at nagsulong ng mga batas na nakakatulong sa mga nangangailangan. Free college education law.
Para sa aming edukasyon.
MSME law.
Batas para sa aming kabuhayan.
Climate Change Act.
Mga batas para sa kalikasan at climate change.
Mga batas na ginawa ko na napapakinabangan ngayon. Sana makatulong pa ako sa mas marami.
Loren Legarda.
This is a paid advertisement.
Quincentenary Faith Rewind.
The image of Santo Niño may have come from Michelin, Flanders, now part of Belgium. There are surviving images that resemble the one in Cebu from 16th century Flanders. King Charles I of Spain grew in Flanders and must have obtained and given images of the Santo Niño for the expedition.
KBP marks 500 years of Christianity and this station.
Dapitan City Councilor Jezebel Bing Balisado, konsihal sa Dakbayan sa Dapitan nga dali duulon og maabibihon sa iyang mga katawhan. Konsihal Bing Balisado maluluyon og matinabangon sa tanang higayon. Konsihal Bing Balisado sa Dakbayan sa Dapitan.
Mas pinalawak, mas pinalakas. RPN sa iba't ibang mga lalawigan. DZRL Bataan, DZBS Baguio, DZKI Iriga, DYKB Bacolod, DYKC Cebu, DXKS Surigao, DXKD Dipolo, DXKO Cagayan de Oro, DXKT Davao, DXKP Pagadian, DXXX Zamboanga, DXDX General Santos. RPN Radio Philippines Network, DXKD Dipolo, Radio Ronda, member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
You often see these dry, red patches on your child's arms, their legs, neck, and maybe other parts of their body. And they're itchy and can cause distress or discomfort to your child. Chances are, it's eczema. The important thing is that it's not contagious. Now, how can parents help? On the program today, we'll talk more about eczema and how you can adjust the skin condition, treat it, and prevent it from flaring up. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is Med Talk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. If you notice your child has dry, red, and bumpy patches on their skin, he or she may have a condition called eczema. Now, our guests are here today to tell us more about this condition. With us is Dr. Zarina Chavez. She's a dermatologist from the Medical City and the Rizal Medical Center. Also with us is Dr. Camilla Faye Ramirez Tuazon, who is a pediatric dermatologist from National Children's Hospital. Now, eczema belongs to an umbrella topic of atopic dermatitis, and most people develop this common condition as infants as well as toddlers, and the risk may start to drop off by the time they reach adulthood. Now, Dr. Chai, what are the main causes for this kaya para ma-aware ang ating mga viewers?
So, atopic eczema is actually a multifactorial condition, meaning there is no single cause that leads to the disease, although instead there are several factors which come into play. So this includes genetic predisposition. So there's also the defects in skin barrier. Our immunity also plays a role, as well as environmental triggers.
Now, there are some risk factors. Of course, a lot of parents might want to know about the risk factors that make a child more vulnerable to this condition. Dr. Camille, let me ask you on this part, what are some of these risk factors na pwedeng present?
So as mentioned a while ago, atopic dermatitis or atopic eczema is actually a complex interplay of your genetic predisposition, environmental factors, integrity of your skin barrier, and even one skin microbiome. So 10 to 30% of atopic eczema patients, usually they have filaggrin mutation. That's the one responsible in holding on the integrity of our skin barrier. So that's one risk factor if they do have that mutation. Environmental triggers such as your irritants, allergens, microbes, and even mechanical injury. These are all some of the triggering factors that can help in the development of eczema in children.
Now, the constant itching, redness, and bumpy skin can be frustrating for both the child as well as the parent. And understanding all of this and the warning signs can help you get the care needed as soon as possible. Now, we mentioned a few symptoms earlier, but let's concentrate on infants for the time being. Dr. Camille, what does this condition look like in infants?
In infants, actually, it's more of the external surfaces that is actually, they do have lesions on the cheeks, the extensor surfaces, so that's how they look like. It's more crusty, sometimes it's more excoriated, and as mentioned a while ago, that they do drool, especially when they're starting to yung feeding nila. So sometimes you see it around the perioral area. So you see red, scaly, thin patches on the extensor surfaces, mostly also on the cheeks.
Now, Dr. Chai, when it comes to eczema, meron ba tong mild, moderate, severe when it comes to it presenting to the child? Meaning, could some of the symptoms be so mild na baka hindi mapansin ng parent na eczema na pala to?
Yes, that's correct. Some patients will just present with dry skin and very itchy skin without overt appearance of rashes. So those patients will not really complain or go to the clinic. But sometimes when they go for other reasons for consult, they say that, Doc, I noticed medyo dry yung balat ng patient or nung anak ko.
In today's reality, the constant hand washing and use of alcohols or sanitizers have become some of the triggers for breakouts of eczema. Now, Dr. Camille, could you tell us more about this? Meron bang option para sa mga bata na sensitive, nagkakaroon ng eczema when it comes to hand washing, soap, sanitizers, alcohol, and things like that?
I think nowadays it's really still important that we tell them or we still educate kids to do hand hygiene. So, however, they're very sensitive when it comes to the ones they're using, especially those with fragrance. So maybe what we can do is to give them those synthetic detergents, like those mild cleansers, without fragrance, and also less ingredients. And right after, we can tell them or also help them in applying their emollients or moisturizers every after hand washing, so that they can also prevent having eczema on their hands, or they can prevent having hand dermatitis.
Now, the itchy, dry, sensitive skin characterized by eczema can be mistaken for psoriasis or other skin conditions. We'll discuss how to tell them apart when we return. So stay with us on MedTalk Health Talk, only on CNN Philippines.
RPN Radio Philippines Network, DXKD Dipolo Radio Ronda.
Taliwala sa nahiagumang pandemya ning atong nasud karon, naninguha ang nasyonal nga pangagamhanan nga ipaabot sa kadaghanan ang mga tubag sa nagbaha nga mga pangutana kabahin sa kahimtang sa tanang katawhan, pinaagi na sa PCOO kun Presidential Communications Operations Office ni Secretary Martin Andanar. Laging handa! Programa sa tanang Sibyaanan nga mohatag katinawan sa mga pangutana sa katawhan. Laging handa! Programang makahatag kasayuran sa benepisyo ug ayuda alang sa katawhan. Laging handa! Programang maghatod sa mga impormasyon kabahin sa pagpangandam ug mga gipatuman sa nasyonal nga pangagamhanan taliwala sa pandemyang COVID-19. Laging handa! Mapaminaw matag Lunes hangtod Sabado alas 11 ngadto alas 12 sa kaugtuhon. Diri lamang sa RPN DXKD Dipolog 1053 kHz sa atong mga AM radio bands o sa RPN DXKD Dipolog sa Facebook account. Magkahiusa kita aron mapakgang ang pagkuyanap sa COVID-19. Laging handa! Hatod ka nato sa Presidential Communications Operations Office kun PCOO.
DXKD Dipolo Radio Ronda.
I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines, where caring is our calling. The chronic skin condition eczema can make your child's skin itchy, irritated, and inflamed. But several skin problems can bring about similar symptoms. An example of that is psoriasis. Dr. Chai, what are some of the symptoms of psoriasis that may be similar to eczema, and how can mothers or parents tell them apart?
Psoriasis is also an inflammatory skin condition or an immune condition, but usually the lesions of psoriasis are thicker rashes, and the scales are also very thick. So we usually see this on areas which are frequently exposed to trauma, such as the outer sides of the arms, the knees, the elbows, and also on the scalp. Also with psoriasis, there's frequently involvement also of the nails. So we see some findings in the nails.
Now, specific tests to diagnose eczema are still unclear. Dr. Chai, could you share your knowledge on how does a dermatologist arrive at the proper diagnosis of eczema? Meron bang specific test para dito?
Okay, so there is no specific laboratory test to diagnose eczema. It is actually diagnosed clinically. So we asked about symptoms of itching, about the course of the disease, whether it's recurrent. We also asked if there are members of the family with atopic conditions such as eczema, allergic rhinitis, and asthma. And then we look at the appearance and location of the rashes.
Now, while a cure is not the main focus of this, there are many things that you can do to reduce the symptoms and prevent flare-ups. And as we mentioned earlier, most children don't carry this condition throughout adulthood. Now, one of the things that your doctor might recommend is to avoid foods that can cause inflammation or that can be a trigger for for eczema. Dr. Chai, what should be eliminated from a child's diet that may be a trigger for eczema?
So usually we don't really recommend elimination diet if we do not prove that it causes flares of eczema, because we don't want to hinder them from getting the nutrition from food. So it's not a routine for us to recommend elimination diet in patients with atopic eczema. But if proven, some which can trigger atopic eczema are eggs, nuts, those foods.
Now, Dr. Camille, pagdating naman sa mga triggers, what should parents be aware of or so that they could be avoided that may be a trigger for eczema?
Those that we do or we buy from the market, let's make sure that all we're using are mild products, non-fragrance, less ingredients as much as possible, plain as much as possible. Also, the detergents that we're using, we are advocating to do double or triple rinsing because it might also trigger their eczemas. Make sure also all the things they're wearing, mostly we can tell parents to wear cotton clothes, and also their daily activities, and we have to tell them to have a good hygiene, give them daily baths because, as I've said earlier, sweat can trigger their eczema.
Now, Dr. Camille, I'd like to ask, is stress a contributory factor? Pwede ba mag-trigger ang eczema ng isang bata due to stress? And if so, paano kaya ma-manage ito ng isang parent?
Yes, stress can really trigger ED, especially now they're doing homeschooling, like online classes. But what we do, and lately also guidelines do, or most of the studies would recommend multidisciplinary approach, and that is integrating like some psychological assessment during their clinic visits. We can do cognitive behavioral therapy to these kids, and also teach them to do some relaxation techniques whenever they have the urge to scratch, and then when they tend to be itchy, because stress really triggers itch, because somehow they do have the same pathway. And also aside from that, we do the habit reversal technique, that whenever they have the urge to scratch or itch, is that they will put their hands or sit on their hands and think of other strategies to divert their attention rather than scratching.
Now, we often see certain parts of the body where eczema is more pronounced. So this is the neck, the back of the elbows, even the back of the knees. Dr. Chai, bakit ito yung mga areas na focus ng eczema kaya?
Okay, so as Dr. Camille said, sweat is a very common trigger for eczema. So usually these are areas where that is occluded by sweat. So in these patients, we usually advise parents to make sure that it is not occluded, and make sure na lagi nilang papahiran yung area if there is already sweat on these areas.
Now, Dr. Camille, right now where a lot of kids may be taking their vaccine for COVID-19, because the rollout for the 12 to 17 age group is now underway. And sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes, these vaccines may cause some side effects. Now, can these side effects kaya ng COVID-19 vaccine, can they somehow be manifested through the skin? Can they look like eczema?
Some of them are scared, especially those known eczema patients already. They're hesitant to have, because some of them might think na baka mag-flare po yung eczema nila. We're here, that your board-certified dermatologist or your primary physicians and pediatricians to guide them, just in case, because still vaccine is more important as of now. So if ever they will have flare of eczema because of the vaccines, or maybe some of them will have manifestations of like morbilliform rashes or like exanthematous, we can always guide them. They can always see us and then help us elevate their symptoms, just in case they will. But based from my experience in taking care of my ED patients who are already who had their 12 to 17, those who are in that range, so far they're not having any symptoms yet.
Now, there are also some home care treatments that can relieve the itchiness and inflammation caused by eczema breakouts. More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. You're watching CNN Philippines.
RPN, sa kagahapon.
Panig sa kagahapon.
Aduna ka ba'y kagahapon nga dili nimo mahimong makalimtan hangtod karon?
Kagahapon sa imong kabatanon, hinigugma og sa pamilya. Ipadangat dinhi sa panig sa kagahapon nga inyong madungog dinhi lang sa nagunang stasyon, ang RPN DXKD Radio Ronda 1053 kHz sa dial sa inyong AM band o makita sa live stream sa DXKD FB page, YouTube ug sa Twitter.
Panig sa kagahapon.
Panig sa kagahapon.
Mahimo sa minyong ipadangat sa DXKD FB Messenger.
Ipalanog ang mga panid sa imong kagahapon kauban ni Inday Angie matag adlong Sabado alas 12 sa udo hangtod alas 2 sa kahaponon. Panig sa kagahapon.
Panig sa kagahapon.
DXKD Dipolo Radio Ronda.
I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. If your child is living with eczema, its symptoms could be affecting his or her quality of sleep, not to mention your own. The good news is there are many home treatments and medications available that can help prevent flare-ups. First of all, Dr. Camille, when it comes to home remedies, is this something that dermatologists would recommend? Is this something that is, for the most part, safe to use? And if so, what are some of these home treatments for children with eczema that is safe and recommended by the dermatologist to use?
So in treating eczema, we have actually basic management. That's giving them baths, giving them daily moisturizers, and avoiding triggers. As home remedy, I recommend also sometimes to those who can do it, to do dilute bleach bath. That's a home remedy. So what you do is you get a half teaspoon of your common household bleach bath and dilute it in 1 gallon of water, or to those with bathtubs, you get a half cup of a common household bleach bath and dilute it there with bathtub full of water. Ask them to leave it to their skin for 5 to 10 minutes and then rinse it, and then repeat it twice weekly just to avoid having skin infection.
Early on the show, we talked about foods that should be avoided. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Chai, are there foods that can help reduce the inflammation caused by eczema?
While anti-inflammatory diet is not yet routinely recommended in patients with atopic eczema, there are foods which can help reduce inflammation. And these are the foods that we generally regard as healthy foods, so which include fatty fish such as salmon, tuna, mackerel, also green leafy vegetables and tomatoes, fruits such as berries, strawberries, and blueberries.
Now, in terms of managing and treatment, there are also creams and over-the-counter medications that can help alleviate some of the symptoms. Dr. Chai, could you mention some of these and maybe some of the safety reminders as well whenever a parent goes out and looks for over-the-counter treatments for eczema?
We have several treatment options for atopic eczema. So we have anti-inflammatory creams or ointments, and usually these are available via your doctor's prescription. So we really discourage patients from self-medicating, especially with what we call steroid creams, because there are side effects which can result from prolonged use of these steroid creams. So aside from that, we can also prescribe other treatments such as phototherapy, which is basically available in some selected dermatology centers. This is just exposure to a certain wavelength of UV light. And then for those who have severe and unresponsive eczema, we can also prescribe tablets. Again, these are available through your doctor's prescription.
What should the parent of a child do kapag napansin niyang parang hindi gumagaling yung mga symptoms with the medication?
First, the parents should be able to identify triggers, because avoidance of triggers of eczema are very important in the management of these conditions. Also, if it doesn't improve with what was given to you by your doctor, then maybe it's about time to follow up with the doctor because there are also other treatment options that we can give for these patients.
Now, eczema can also affect a child's self-confidence as well as their mental well-being. Because of the redness and inflammation, a child can get very self-conscious, and other kids might not also understand this condition and might react to it harshly or even negatively. Dr. Camille, do you have any tips for parents to help their children deal with these effects?
Check on them all the time. Tell them that even if it's hard to treat, there are some things that we can do to alleviate their symptoms, and also to reduce their anxiety. Make sure also to give them proper education, and just sometimes listening to all of them when they visit the clinic is all that matters. So sometimes just show them that you're there for them to in this journey.
And with that, I'd like to thank dermatologists Dr. Zarina Chavez and Dr. Camille Faye Tuazon for sharing with us your very important insights. Marami pong salamat sa inyo. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. We'll see you again next time.